So my butthole doesn't work anymore. Now it's just for show and tell. But the funny thing is, if aliens came and abducted me and tried to do a probe, they'd be like, send them back. This one's broken.
If children believe.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to More Than Just Walking podcast. My name's Tim, and I'm a C5 quadriplegic, and I talk about different aspects of living life with a spinal cord injury and overcoming obstacles living life paralyzed. So in this episode, I want to talk about my decision to get a colostomy. I know there's a lot of stereotypes about getting colostomy bags, image being one of them, and also wearing a bag of poop on your stomach. And to be honest, those were legit fears of mine before and shortly after. So in the beginning, shortly after when I woke up from a coma, the nurse came in the room and said, it's time for your silver bullet. I was like, silver bullet? Hell yeah, I'll take a Coors Light. She rolled me on my side and jammed a suppository in my butt. I mean, she didn't even buy me dinner first. So in the beginning, I had no idea how you did a bowel routine with a spinal cord injury. And then after about 20 minutes, she came in and gave me a hard lesson on what digital stimulation is. So digital stimulation is where you take a digit, which is your index finger or a finger, you stick it in the rectum, you do some circles, and you get that medication stirred around, and it stimulates the rectum and induces a bowel movement. So after a couple weeks of doing that every other day, the nurse comes in and she's like, you're not going very much. And I'm like, well, I don't eat very much. I was super depressed. I didn't want to be in the hospital, so I wasn't hungry. So I wasn't really eating a lot. And so we moved it to every 3 days. So after the first couple times of doing that, I was just over it. And so were my helpers, but we did what we had to do. So after about 15 years of doing that, every 2 to 3 days, I noticed it was getting harder and harder to go. I was getting constipated quite a bit. My issue mostly was I wasn't drinking enough water. I'm going to repeat that. I wasn't drinking enough water. Which makes perfect sense because picture trying to go down a water slide with no water in it. That water helps lubricate everything on your insides to get everything to slide easy. So I noticed suppositories were taking longer and longer and sometimes had a delayed effect and I would have an accident. So I did some research and joined some spinal cord injury groups on Facebook, and somebody brought up something called enemies, E-N-E-M-E-E-Z. So what it is a mini enema. You just insert it into your rectum and you squeeze the tube. It puts the medication right in there for you. This product is awesome. If you are still doing a bowel routine and you're having issues going, look into enemies. You can buy it over the counter, but sometimes insurance will pay for it with a prescription. After a while of doing the enemies, I was still having a hard time going. So the night before, I would take a laxative and I would lay there with stomach cramps all night, listening to my stomach gurgle, and it wasn't comfortable at all. I'll say it for a third time. The number one reason why I was getting constipated mostly was because I wasn't drinking enough water. So along with bowel routines getting harder to go, I was noticing I would have accidents more frequent. I would get done doing my bowel routine after usually it would take 2 to 3 hours on an easy day. I would get cleaned up, I'd get in the shower, and I'd get out of the shower, get dressed, get transferred into my chair, start my day. The helpers would get ready to leave or they would be gone, and I'd hear my stomach start gurgling. I'm like, are you kidding me? Not again. And then all of a sudden I would feel it. It was coming out. There was nothing I could do. You just have to sit there and just let it happen, and it sucked. So I'd have to call my helpers back. They'd have to come back, transfer me back into bed, clean me up, jump back in the shower, transfer back and forth. It was just a mess. I was so over it. So I made an appointment with a gastroenterologist who suggested I do a colonoscopy, where they stick a long tube with a camera inside your intestines to see what's going on. And he said it was a good thing I was doing it a little bit early because my grandfather had actually had colon cancer. So before my first colonoscopy, the doctor gave me 2 laxatives, which wasn't a very good idea because I started having extreme muscle spasms in my stomach. And then he gave me a gallon of that Go Lightly to drink, and it supposedly tastes like Gatorade. It tastes nothing like Gatorade. So anyways, I started drinking it and I transferred into my shower chair. And eventually I started going. I got about half of the gallon down and it started coming out, which is, fine, whatever. But it was horrible sitting there with stomach cramps and like more and more muscle spasms, like trying to hold on to my shower chair. So anyways, after all these muscle spasms in my stomach started to feel like nauseous. And I was like, I'm going to throw up. So I started throwing up. It was coming out both ends and it was horrible. I couldn't take sitting in the chair anymore. I was in there for about 2.5 hours. And the shower chair isn't very soft. It's a little cushion. It's pretty hard to sit in for a prolonged amount of time. So I transferred into bed and I put a garbage bag in front of my face to throw up in, and a garbage bag at my rear end because I was going out both ends, and it was just a mess. So ultimately all of that was for nothing because I ended up having to cancel my appointment because it was still coming out both ends, and I just wasn't going to go to my appointment. Still going. So we ended up rescheduling my colonoscopy, and before that they offered an aqua prep. An aqua prep is where they put a tube in your rectum and they fill you with water and then they suck it back out, which is actually pretty cool for those that have issues getting cleaned out and they can't do the go lightly and the laxatives and all that. So it worked perfect. So they transferred me to the table, did the aqua prep. I got back in my chair. So I was finally able to get the colonoscopy done, and the results said I had what looked to be like the early signs of colitis. Colitis is an inflammatory reaction in the colon, often autoimmune or from infection. I think I have like certain food intolerances which kind of led up to it. And one of my medications, again, because I wasn't drinking enough water and flushing all these medications through, this medication would burn my intestines, and it kind of started in my stomach, and you could feel it like burn all the way down through. And I could kind of pinpoint where this medication was. But I definitely think that was one of the contributing factors to my intestinal inflammation. And also using the laxatives and suppositories probably didn't help. So after more and more accidents, I finally got fed up, and I did some research, and I decided that I wanted to have a colostomy done. And the doctor said I was a perfect candidate for it with my spinal cord injury. And, you know, it's just easier on your body to go, and there's no more digital stimulation, no more suppositories, and there's no more laxatives, things like that I have to do, and things would flow naturally. It was just a good idea for everyone, honestly. And I was sick and tired of just being sick all day the next day after taking laxatives. Usually about 1:30 in the afternoon was the point of no return, where the laxative would kind of like lose its effect. Because I was afraid if I would eat before 1:30, it would just go right through me. And that happened on multiple occasions. And like I said, I was worried about the image factor and the fact that I would have like a bag of poop sitting on my stomach. After weighing the pros and cons, I decided to just go for it. And whatever happens, happens. I joined an ostomy group. You know, I was worried, would somebody like me still with, you know, wearing a colostomy bag? And honestly, when you find that person that cares so much about you, they don't care about the bag. It's better for you, and they care about that, and they care about your health overall. And I was worried about the smell also because I have a heightened sense of smell, which I'll get into that in a minute. But after going back and forth, I decided to just go for it. So I made the appointment for the colostomy. It was the day after my birthday of 2020. About 4 days before, he made me do just like a clear liquid diet. I wasn't allowed to have any solid foods, and he wanted me to start like stool softeners and things like that. And then the day before, I did a laxative, and this experimental laxative he gave me, which wasn't fun. The morning before my procedure, I took it in the morning, got in the shower, did my bowel routine. And when I got out of the shower, thankfully I have hardwood floors, because when I hovered over the shower chair, it's like a waterfall released, and it was just a huge mess all over the floor. And that sucked. All in all, it wasn't too bad. It could have been worse. It could have been the gallon of stuff that I drank or whatever, but I didn't have to go through all that, luckily. The morning of my procedure, I get to the hospital, and they gave me that same experimental drug that cleans you out or whatever. I tried to refuse it, but he said it was a good idea, which honestly it kind of was, because there was still some stuff in there that needed to come out, and he wanted me like clean, because the more clean you are, the easier the procedure is going to go. So the one nurse came in to try to do my IV. She stuck me about 3 times and missed every single time. And I asked if somebody else could do it. She said, give me one more shot. So she tried to do it again, and then there was blood everywhere. There's blood all over my gown. From that medication, I started pooping everywhere. I had to roll up and throw up into one of those containers. It was just a big mess. So I finally had enough Nurse Ratchet trying to do my IV, and the anesthesia guy came in, stuck it right away, and got it instantly. So I'm all for anesthesiologists doing the IV from now on, and I sometimes request them to do it anyways. Which, no offense to some people out there, I'm just a hard stick anyways. But if somebody tries it once and can't get it, I have to go. I have to have somebody else do it. The doctor came in and asked if I was ready. He said he was ready to go. And I asked if it was okay if I went back and still sick. And he said, yeah, we can give you some medication to help, calm your stomach and whatever. And they came in, gave me the medication. I got a little bit sleepy, and they started to wheel me in. And there's pretty much no returning after that. You can still have a reverse on a colostomy depending on how it's done. But honestly, looking back, I would never go back to the old way. I love having this bag. So when I woke up in recovery, I was in an extreme amount of pain. And to my surprise, the pain wasn't so much in my stomach. I mean, it was there and it was terrible. But in my shoulder blades, for whatever reason, it felt like my back was being ripped apart at my shoulder blades. And I didn't find out till after he said that he had to put me in like a weird position and like stretch me like kind of angled up a little bit. Why? I'm not really sure. It's whatever they have to do. And I had bruises like all over my crotch, all over my stomach, which naturally they're cutting you open, they're gonna have bruises. But like where they had to strap me down and like they just had to put me in a weird position, he said, and like I would spasm. Like as soon as my back would start spasming, it would spread everywhere, and it was just 2 full days of just nothing but muscle spasms. Honestly, I wish I would have accepted the medication the first day. The first night I didn't sleep at all, and then the second day she came in and she said you could take some morphine, and they brought it in, and I finally took it. And I got a decent night's sleep the second night. So after you have a colostomy, the first thing they want is you to have a bowel movement. It did take like 3 days or so to get anything to start moving again. Because after anesthesia, your insides want to like go to sleep. So looking down and seeing the wafer in the bag at the first time, it's kind of scary, but kind of exciting at the same time. So the bag they gave me at first was clear on the front, and you can kind of see inside of it. And everything was like dark and bloody, which is normal. So the wound care nurse came in and showed me how to change the wafer in the bag for the first time. And it's definitely a learning process. First, it takes some getting used to. Do you want a 1-piece? Do you want a 2-piece? What works best for you? So before I set up my appointment, they made me wear a wafer for a few days to make sure my body was okay with wearing the appliance, and I didn't have an allergic reaction to it. I'd say the first month after my procedure was probably the hardest, which was figuring out which wafer works best for me. Did I want a 1-piece, a 2-piece, drainable bag, disposable bag? It all depends on your preference and what works best for you. And there was also cutting the wafer and training my helpers how to do all these things. And then I finally discovered from Convatec the wafer that I use now is actually moldable. So you can actually like take the interior waxy part that's real sticky, and you can move it to the size of your stoma, apply it, stick it down, and then move it, like mold it back to right around the stoma, and it kind of makes like a nice snug seal. But after about 2 weeks, I started to develop a rash about the same size as my wafer, which was really weird because I wore it, like I said before, and I had no reaction. And I was like, damn it, did I make the right decision? Like, am I gonna have to like reverse this? Because the rash wasn't getting any better. So then one day I actually forgot to use the barrier wipe, which is a wipe that makes a sticky film that you put around your stoma. And I forgot to put that on, and then the next wafer change, it actually looked a little bit better. So I discovered I actually had an allergy to whatever's in the barrier wipe, and I stopped using it, and luckily everything cleared right up, which is crazy. So one thing I didn't know prior to having a colostomy is they actually leave about 8 inches of your rectum still intact. So from your butthole to about 8 inches up, it's still there. And that still works. So the one day I get out of the shower and there's like brown stuff on my seat, the shower chair seat. I was like, I don't understand why there's still stuff coming out. Nothing should be attached. So in a panic, I call the doctor. I'm like, did you leave something still attached? Is there still stuff in there? Like, what's going on? And he said, no, calm down. This is normal. We had to leave 8 inches of rectum still intact, and it still creates the mucus and it'll still come out. So twice a week, you should go in with water, warm water, and rinse it out and just clean all that stuff out. So I looked on Amazon and I found a rechargeable like douche thing that you fill up with water and you stick it in there and you hold the button and it actually like squirts water in there and it'll flush all that stuff out. So if you also have to do that, you might want to get one because they work awesome. So my butthole doesn't work anymore. Now it's just for show and tell. But the funny thing is, if aliens came and abducted me and tried to do a probe, they'd be like, send them back. This one's broken.
Again, if children believe.
So a couple months after I had my colostomy, I started having constipation issues again. And the doctor said maybe I should give irrigation a try. I was like, man, I don't want to do that. I don't want to add more stuff to my plate that I already have. What irrigation is you have a bag of water with a long tube and it has a cone. And you wear what's called an irrigation sleeve, and it clips on your wafer, and it runs like a slide down into the toilet. Or you can sit on the toilet. Most people sit on the toilet and do it. I do it right from my chair, right beside the toilet. I hang the bag on the door, and then there's a long tube with a cone, and you insert the cone inside the stoma. And you have a little roller clamp. You can turn the water on and off as you need. And what I do is I fill in 700 milliliters of water first, and I let that flush out, and it flushes everything in my intestines out. And I do 500 and then another 500 if need be. And I do that every 24 to 48 hours. And in between, I have zero output in my bag normally, unless I have some kind of stomach issue, or like sometimes I take antibiotics for UTI and I'll have like loose stool that'll come out. But other than that, 99% of the time my bag is empty. Yeah, I was definitely against trying it at first, but I'm glad I did. It makes cleanup so much easier, and wafer change, so I use the zero output. Before I irrigated, changing my bag, you get some like surprise output, and it wasn't great. And you want to make sure you use warm water, like lukewarm water, as close to body temperature as you can. You don't want to use hot water, and you definitely don't want to use cold water. Cold water makes your insides cramp up too much, and it's just not very comfortable, and things can take longer and things can delay. You could have delayed output as well. And you obviously don't want to use hot water and burn your intestines. That's not a good idea either. Definitely ask your doctor if irrigation is an option for you after your healing process. So if you're like me and you're tired of doing your 2 to 3 hour bowel routine and tired of accidents, look into getting a colostomy, because I'm 100% for it. If you have any questions about it, you're more than welcome to leave a comment in the comment section. I'm more than happy to answer any questions anybody has. So yeah, definitely Team Colostomy for the win. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of More Than Just Walking podcast. I'm your host, Tim Taylor, and we'll see you in the next one. What? You're still here? Awesome. Well, here's a couple more videos for you to enjoy.